Most people spend their lives trying to fit in, but some of us were never meant to. If you've spent your life on the edges, too quiet, too different, never fully belonging, here's the truth. That separation isn't a curse. It's an evolutionary gift, a power that, if you learn to use it, can give you something most people never find: peace that can't be taken away. Being an outsider doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. You're in a room full of people, conversations flow, laughter bounces, and yet you feel like you're behind glass, watching it all from a distance. You nod, you smile, you play along, but deep down there's a quiet knowing. These aren't my people. This isn't my rhythm. For years, that sense of separation feels like a weight. You tell yourself you need to change, to blend, to force yourself into the roles everyone else seems to play so effortlessly. But the harder you try to fit, the more you lose yourself, and the emptier it feels. What if the real problem isn't that you don't belong, but that you're trying to belong in the wrong place? What if the very space you've been avoiding, your solitude, is where your real strength has been hiding all along? From the beginning of history, every society has needed outsiders. Not everyone was meant to move in step with the tribe. In fact, survival often depended on the ones who didn't. While most followed the routines of the day, a few stood apart, scanning the horizon, noticing patterns, questioning what others ignored. In small tribes, these outsiders were the scouts, the ones who sensed danger before it arrived, who spotted opportunities others overlooked. They weren't always celebrated. Often they were misunderstood, sometimes even feared. But they carried something the tribe desperately needed: perspective. Fast forward to the modern world. The tribe is now billions of people, all connected, all marching to the rhythms of trends, schedules, and scripts. In this chaos, the role of the outsider hasn't disappeared. It's become more crucial. The ability to step back, to resist the pull of conformity, to think independently, isn't just a personality quirk. It's a survival skill for the mind. Psychologists call this trait low social conformity. Philosophers call it independence. But to the outsider who lives it, it often feels like loneliness. You're not swept up by the same currents, so you stand still while everyone else drifts. That pause, that distance, is what gives you clarity. And here's the paradox. The very thing that makes you feel cut off from others is the thing that connects you more deeply to truth. Outsiders may struggle to belong to groups, but they belong to something larger, the reality that groups often miss. That's the outsider's advantage. You see what others can't, because you're not blinded by the need to agree. Here's the truth most outsiders learn the hard way. The need to belong is ancient, and it does not ask for permission. It pulses under your logic, beneath your calm, and when it's threatened, it hurts like a wound you can't quite see. You can know, intellectually, that you're built for a different rhythm, and still feel your stomach drop when a room goes quiet after you speak your mind. As kids, many outsiders practiced two survival strategies. The first was masking, learning the lines, mimicking the laugh, softening the edges so no one would notice how far your thoughts wandered. The second was shrinking, saying less, standing back, avoiding the places where your difference would be too visible. Masking gets you invited, shrinking keeps you safe. But both have a cost. You abandon the parts of you that carry the very signal you were born to transmit. That's why belonging hurts more for you than for most. You're not just trying to be accepted. You're trying to be accepted without losing the clarity that makes you you. The crowd will always be happy to welcome you if you agree to leave your instrument at the door. And every time you do, you feel the same silent grief. I was there, but I wasn't present. They saw a version, not the person. There's another layer to the pain: hyper-awareness. Outsiders notice micro-shifts, tone, timing, tension in the air. You sense when a topic is taboo before anyone says it. You feel when the room wants certainty while your mind is still mapping complexity. That sensitivity is a gift in the wild. In a social environment built on speed and slogans, it becomes friction. You're reading subtext while everyone else is reading headlines. So you experiment. You try being louder. You try being softer. You try being funny, mystical, hyper-rational. For a night, it works, until the old hollow feeling returns, because none of those strategies answer the real question. Where does a mind like yours belong? Here's the reframe. Belonging isn't a place you squeeze into. It's a nervous system state you carry with you. It's not the crowd finally understanding you. It's you understanding you so clearly that misunderstanding stops feeling like a threat. Belonging, for an outsider, begins when you stop negotiating your perception to win temporary peace. That doesn't mean isolation. It means clean boundaries. It means you no longer audition for rooms that punish depth, and you stop blaming yourself for the discomfort your clarity creates in shallow spaces. It means you let your solitude do its work, not as a bunker, but as a workshop, until the person who walks back into the world is someone who no longer asks the world for permission to exist. The pain of belonging doesn't vanish overnight, but it changes shape. It becomes less like a wound and more like a compass. When you feel that tug, the subtle ache that says I'm disappearing here, you don't mask harder, you pivot. You move toward the places, the projects, and the people where your full signal isn't just tolerated, it's useful. Because that's the secret almost no one tells you. Outsiders don't find peace by finally fitting in. They find peace by finally fitting together, inside themselves first, then with a few others who value truth over comfort. That's where the loneliness begins to lift. Not because the world changed its standards, but because you changed your center of gravity. Solitude is one of those words people misunderstand. They confuse it with isolation, with being cut off, with a kind of exile. But solitude isn't what happens when no one wants you around. Solitude is what happens when you choose to be with yourself fully, without apology, without escape. And for outsiders, that choice is everything. Here's the paradox. The same separation that once felt like punishment can become your greatest protection, if you design it instead of drifting into it. Isolation drains you because it feels accidental. Solitude restores you because it feels intentional. The difference is agency. Think of solitude as a kind of mental architecture. You're building a space that supports clarity instead of chaos. If you don't design it, the noise of the world will leak through every crack. But if you do, solitude becomes the workshop where you sharpen your edge. Designing solitude starts with rituals of separation. Not dramatic gestures, but small, repeatable boundaries that tell your nervous system, we are stepping out of the crowd, we are safe here. It could be as simple as taking a walk at the same hour every evening, journaling before bed, or starting the day without touching a screen. These aren't productivity hacks, they're signals. They remind your mind that you belong to yourself first. Next comes selective input. In solitude, the quality of what enters your mind determines the quality of what grows there. Outsiders thrive when they replace reactive scrolling with intentional study, when they trade noise for depth. Read the book no one else is reading. Sit with a question no one else is asking. Give your mind the raw materials it craves, and it will return insights the crowd could never assemble. And then, perhaps the most overlooked piece, creative output. Solitude isn't just about retreat. It's about producing something that only emerges in the quiet. A thought, a design, a melody, a plan. Outsiders who never channel their solitude into creation end up drowning in their own perception. But when you use solitude as a forge, every insight you once thought was a burden becomes a tool. What you'll notice is this. When solitude is designed, loneliness fades. Not because the number of people in your life changes, but because the quality of your relationship with yourself does. You no longer sit in silence waiting for someone to rescue you from it. You sit in silence and realize, this is where you become. And when you step back into the noise, you carry something different. You're not begging for belonging. You're bringing an atmosphere of calm the crowd didn't know it needed. The irony is that solitude, when embraced, makes you magnetic. People sense the steadiness you built in private. They can't always name it, but they feel it. And that's when the outsider becomes something more, a stabilizer in a world that runs on chaos. Peace, on its own, is valuable. But peace in the hands of an outsider, that's power. Not the kind that shouts, dominates, or demands attention. A quieter power, one that bends reality because it doesn't bend to reality's illusions. When you master solitude, you no longer panic in silence. You don't grasp for validation. You're not desperate for the crowd's energy to keep you upright. And in a culture addicted to constant stimulation, that calm becomes magnetic. People lean toward those who don't need the noise. They feel steadier around you, even if they can't explain why. There are 3 dimensions where solitude turns into superpower: clarity, resilience, and influence. Clarity is the first. Outsiders see patterns because they're not swept up by them. While others rush from distraction to distraction, you step back. You notice connections. You see the contradiction between what's said and what's done. You read the undercurrent. Solitude sharpens this perception into precision. It lets you filter the raw data of the world without drowning in it. The result? Insights that feel almost prophetic to people still caught in the noise. Resilience is the second. Most people fear being alone with themselves. That fear makes them manipulable. It's why entire populations can be steered with slogans and threats of exile. But when solitude is familiar to you, rejection loses its sting. You've already faced it. You've already built a life inside it. The crowd's approval becomes optional, not essential. That's resilience, standing steady while others collapse at the hint of disapproval. Influence is the third. It sounds strange. How can the one who doesn't fit in influence anyone? But think about it. True influence doesn't come from shouting the loudest. It comes from embodying something others secretly crave. In a shallow world, depth is irresistible. In a frantic world, calm is contagious. In a dishonest world, authenticity cuts through like a blade. Outsiders who've turned solitude into peace radiate a kind of permission. They show others that it's possible to exist without the crowd's leash. That example alone changes people more than arguments ever could. History is full of these invisible influences. Philosophers who wrote in exile, artists who created in obscurity, thinkers who were dismissed in their time only to shape entire generations later. They weren't powerful because they had armies or wealth. They were powerful because they couldn't be broken by the crowd. And because they carried clarity, resilience, and influence, their ideas outlived the very societies that ignored them. This doesn't mean every outsider has to become a prophet or an icon. Power doesn't have to be global to be real. For some, it's building a family culture that resists the chaos outside. For others, it's crafting work so precise and authentic that it changes a field. For others still, it's simply living in such a way that one friend, one student, one stranger feels less alone because of your presence. That's the thing about outsider power. It's not measured in followers or applause. It's measured in depth, in steadiness, in the way your existence itself becomes a quiet rebellion against the madness of conformity. And in times of collapse, those are the powers that matter most. Inner peace doesn't just appear the moment you accept your difference. It's something you build, like a craft, and outsiders build it differently than everyone else, not by chasing constant connection, but by mastering the quiet. Here are 5 practices that turn forced solitude into lasting strength. 1. Create a personal sanctuary. Outsiders need a space where they are not performing, not explaining, not negotiating who they are. This isn't about luxury or aesthetics. It could be a corner of a room, a desk, a notebook, a daily walk. What matters is that it's yours. a place where your nervous system knows, here, I can be whole. Over time, that space becomes more than physical. It becomes a state of mind you can carry anywhere. 2. Practice deep noticing. Most people skim reality like headlines. Outsiders are wired to read the fine print. Lean into that. Sit with silence and watch your own thoughts unfold. Notice how your body reacts in different spaces, how your emotions shift with different inputs. The more you notice, the less you are at the mercy of unconscious pulls. Deep noticing turns solitude into a mirror, showing you both your shadows and your strengths. 3. Anchor your meaning. Without a strong why, solitude can slip into emptiness. For outsiders, meaning can't come from fitting in, it has to come from a personal compass. Maybe it's the pursuit of truth. Maybe it's creating something that outlives you. Maybe it's protecting people you love. The point is not what it is, but that it's yours. Once you're anchored, the storms of conformity lose their power to sweep you away. 4. Cultivate selective connections. Outsiders don't need hundreds of shallow ties. They need a few rare ones, people who value honesty over comfort, depth over small talk, truth over approval. Even one relationship like this can transform the experience of solitude from exile into choice. Seek out those who challenge you respectfully, who sharpen you rather than dilute you. That's your real tribe. 5. Turn solitude into creation. Reflection without expression can become a trap. The thoughts spiral, the clarity burns holes, but nothing takes form. Creation is the release valve. Write, build, design, compose. Even if no one ever sees it, creation turns solitude into contribution. It shifts your story from I am alone to I am producing something only I can give. And that shift is everything. Peace for outsiders isn't about avoiding conflict or numbing the ache or waiting for the crowd to understand. It's about structuring your inner world so well that the outer one loses its power to dictate your worth. That doesn't make you untouchable. You'll still feel the sting of rejection, the pull of doubt, the ache of distance. But those no longer become signals that you're broken. They become reminders that you're walking a different path, one that was never meant to be crowded but was always meant to be clear. Every age has its outsiders, people who carried a kind of clarity that the crowd wasn't ready for. Socrates, ridiculed and sentenced for asking questions that pierced illusions. Galileo, silenced for seeing too far into the heavens. Kafka, whose writings barely found an audience in his lifetime. Emily Dickinson, whose poems lived in drawers until long after she was gone. None of them were chasing applause. In fact, most endured suspicion, misunderstanding, even exile. But what they built in solitude eventually reshaped the world. Not because they fought the crowd on its terms, but because they stood so firmly in their own that the crowd eventually had to notice. That is the quiet paradox of the outsider's path. You may feel invisible now, overlooked, even dismissed. But invisibility can be a kind of shield. It gives you time to refine your vision before the world is ready to see it. The clarity you build in solitude, the peace you wrestle from loneliness, the strength you forge without witnesses, none of it is wasted. It's the raw material of a legacy. The truth is, not every outsider becomes famous. Most won't. But fame was never the measure. The measure is whether you lived aligned with what you saw, whether you built from what you knew, whether you carried peace in a world of chaos. That is influence. Whether it reaches millions or just a handful whose lives are forever different because you crossed their path. So if you've spent your life on the edges wondering if you're broken, here's the answer. You're not. You were never meant to vanish into the crowd. You were meant to see differently, to walk differently, to live differently. And in that difference lies your advantage. The guide to inner peace isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering that your solitude is not a prison. It's a forge. It's where the noise burns away and the signal remains. It's where the outsider becomes whole. And when you step back into the world with that wholeness, you carry something most people never find, a peace that cannot be taken away. That is your gift. That is your power. That is your legacy.